What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. We continue with our post-spring power rankings. The Big 12 is up next, and I'll tell you what, this is a tough conference to rank. There's so much parity in this conference, and it's this way every year. And there are no bad teams. There are no teams in the Big 12 that are going to be just awful this year. I just feel like even the team that I have at number 14 is going to be a quality team. You know, it used to be where we had Kansas, and that was the one team you could count on for being terrible. But I've actually got Kansas in the top half of these power rankings for post-spring. So let's jump right into it. Number 14 is actually going to be Cincinnati. And again, I don't think Cincinnati is going to be a bad team, but I've got them at number 14. Emory Jones coming over at quarterback will be very interesting. I got a nice 1-2 punch at running back with Corey Kiner and Ryan Montgomery. A little bit concerned about the receivers. They did add some transfers, so I think they'll be okay there. And just with the new coaching staff, you do sometimes question that first year. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Offensive line is a pretty big concern. They added some transfers from the lower levels, but we'll see how they play out. I think this offensive line could be probably the biggest weakness of this offense for Cincinnati. Defensively, I'm concerned about the linebackers and the secondary, especially the cornerbacks. I'm just really not sure how good they're going to be there. The defensive line, though, is going to be really, really good. Jawan Briggs is back. This is an All-American caliber type player. He's really good. Dante Corleone also back on that defensive line. And they've got some other players as well. That's going to be the strength of this defense. Maybe the strength of this team is that defensive line. But again, the back seven, a pretty big question mark. And then the offensive line on that side of the ball definitely concerns me. Let's go to number 13. That's going to be BYU. BYU, another team going to be adding a transfer quarterback. Keaton Slovis comes over to BYU. We'll see how that plays out. They've got Aiden Robbins transfer in at running back. You look at the wide receivers for them, also not great. I don't see a whole lot there. In fact, probably worse than Cincinnati at that position. They do have Isaac Rex at tight end, pretty good tight end. Offensive line looks a little better than, again, if we're comparing BYU and Cincinnati, their offensive line looks a little better. Connor Pay's a really good player, got him at center. Kingsley Samatier, and I'm sorry if I say some of these names wrong, at tackle. Caleb Etienne transfer from Oklahoma State. You can go through this offensive line. They're going to be pretty good there. And then you look at the defense, pretty solid. Linebackers look good. That's going to be the strength of this defense. Secondary is a little iffy. Defensive line, average at best. But those linebackers look really good. So it's a close one between BYU and Cincinnati for that last spot. But we're going to go with BYU just because they're not going to have a new coach and have to deal with all that. Let's go to number 12 now, Iowa State Cyclones. So this is a team that coming into this season, you look back to last year and they were so young. They lost so many close games. I was ready to put them in the top half. I thought that this is a team that's going to surprise people this year. But if you really evaluate the roster, it's just not there. This team is not, in my opinion, going to contend in the Big 12. We'll see. I could be wrong. Hunter Deckers is back at quarterback. He was actually pretty good last year. A pleasant surprise. You got Brock at running back also coming back. Jalen Knoll, Dimitri Stanley at wide receiver. So they've got some good weapons there at the skill positions here on offense. Offensive line looks to be okay, not great. That's probably going to be their biggest weakness on that side of the ball. And then you look at the defense. The secondary, they've got some really good players in the secondary. They do, TJ Tampa at cornerback, really good player. Miles Purchase also at cornerback. Safeties look really good. But the front seven, that's where I'm a little bit concerned. Now, they've been able to get a lot out of these players in the past, and they've had some good defenses. So we'll see if they can do that this year. But that is definitely a concern for me for Iowa State. But it's still a team, again, that was young last year, and I expect them to be better this year. But there's just a ton of competition in the Big 12. This is going to be a very competitive conference. I've got Houston at number 11. Of course, they're making their way to the Big 12 for the first time. I love the transfer of Donovan Smith at quarterback. I think he's a really underrated player. I think he's a really good quarterback. You look at the running backs, they got Brandon Campbell coming back. He wound up being pretty good last year for them. Stacy Snead as well. So they should be able to run the football. You're obviously going to miss some of those guys at wide receiver. Samuel Brown, though, will be back. And so I think this offense, they've been pretty good consistently, so I'm not too concerned with that side of the ball. Offensive line looks to be pretty solid for them as well. You go to the defensive side, Nelson Caesar at defensive end, a really good player there. The defensive line overall looks to be pretty good. Linebackers pretty good. Secondary pretty good. They're just not going to have the talent as much talent as some of the top teams in the Big 12. But this still will be a pretty good team. I think, again, there are no bad teams in the Big 12, and I think Houston will be a very competitive team. Number 10 is West Virginia. This is a team that, we'll see. We'll see if they can kind of get over the hump. They've been struggling the last couple of years. Garrett Green, does he take over at quarterback? That'll be interesting to watch. They actually just lost Tony Mathis, potentially their starting running back, but they do have Justin Johnson and C.J. Donaldson, so a couple of young guys that should be able to step in there that played pretty well for them last year. Looking at the wide receiver position, maybe a couple transfers come in and help them there. Offensive line looks to be pretty good. This is going to be a good offensive line. They're going to be able to run the football. That's going to be the strength of this team, is the offensive line and their ability to run the football. And also Garrett Green, you get a dual threat quarterback, so that's going to be different. And this is going to be a different looking offense for West Virginia. They're not going to have as many talented wide receivers, not going to have a quarterback who's going to want to sling it all around. So it'll be interesting to watch this offense and how they play. You look at the defensive side of the ball, they've added some transfers, some guys that were not high-level recruits or anything, some guys coming from the lower levels and all that. So I don't know how that's going to play out. Talent-wise, this defense is not going to be great, but they've got a decent amount of experience with some of these transfers coming in. They've got a pretty solid secondary. So West Virginia comes in here at number 10. Let's move on to number 9. I got Oklahoma State. This is a team that I thought would wind up even lower in these rankings, but they did a nice job in the transfer portal. Alan Bowman, who has experience, remember, at Texas Tech, he's been at Michigan. That's going to be an interesting story for them at quarterback if he winds up being the starter. Again, he was good at Texas Tech, and we'll see if he can kind of get that back here now that he's back in the Big 12. You look at the running back spot for them, Ollie Gordon, Jaden Nixon, Elijah Collins, a transfer, so they've got some DeAndre Jackson as well. They've got a stable of running backs. Wide receivers look to be pretty strong there as well. Brennan Presley will be back. Added some transfers at that position also. Offensive line looks to be okay. They'll be, I guess, a little bit above average, maybe, I would say, or average as far as the other teams in the Big 12 go. So not a bad offensive line, but you look at the defensive side for them, Colin Oliver back at defensive end, going to be really good for them. Anthony Goodlow, defensive end. They've got some talent there on that defensive line. Then you look at the linebackers, Justin Wright, really good player there at linebacker. Also Xavier Benson. So I think the linebacker position, they did a nice job filling some holes there. Secondary looks to be pretty strong. Kendall Daniels, a really good player there at safety. And so a defense that'll be solid, I think, and an offense that this should be pretty solid as well. So I think Oklahoma State, again, a team that a lot of people were expecting to maybe not be good this year, I think they could wind up being pretty good. Let's go to number 8 now, Baylor. This is another team that was real young last year. They do bring back their starting quarterback and Blake Shapen. Dominic Richardson comes over at running back for them. They got Quaylon Jones also back at running back. Richard Reese, though, probably going to be their starter. And then you look at the wide receivers. Monterey Baldwin, really good player there. Ketron Jackson, transfer coming in. Hal Presley. So this is going to be a decent group of wide receivers. Offensive line, they look to be pretty decent there. I think maybe they take a bit of a step back on the offensive line from where they were last year. So that's maybe a little bit of a concern. Defensive side of the ball, defensive line looks to be pretty strong. Linebackers look to be pretty decent as well. Secondary is a concern. Now, this is a secondary that may not be great this year. So that's one of my big concerns for the Baylor Bears. But still, I think there are enough pieces there to where they can have a pretty solid season. Let's move into the top 7 now. And we'll start with Kansas here at number 7. If we were going to go by the most experienced team, that might be Kansas. They are absolutely loaded with returning production. You got Jalen Daniels, of course, he got injured last year. They got off to that great start when he was in there. Jason Bean played pretty well for them as well. So you got 2 options at quarterback. Devin Neal at running back, he'll be the leader for them there. Luke Grime, Lawrence Arnold at wide receiver. really good players. Mason Fairchild at tight end. You look at the offensive line, it actually looks really strong. So this is a defense, or an offense, I should say, that has a lot of production coming back and some really talented players. They should be able to score points for sure. Then you go to the defensive side for them, and again, they have experience coming back, but they're just not going to be the most talented defense. Kobe Bryant, Melo Dotson at cornerback, those are a couple of really good players for them. But overall, and I would say overall in the secondary, they're pretty good. Kenny Logan at safety. So this is a secondary that should be good. But front seven, they're not going to be as talented as some of the other teams in the Big 12. But if we're talking experience, this Kansas team has a ton of it. They're going to be well coached. They're going to be good. Watch out for the Jayhawks. UCF might actually challenge them, though, for being the most experienced team in the Big 12 this year. They have a ton of production coming back. Also adding some experienced players in the transfer portal. This team could really surprise, I think, in their first year in the Big 12. John Rice Plumlee, he'll be back at quarterback. They got the talented running back in DeMarcus Bowman, a big-time recruit. We'll see if he can live up to that. But R.J. Harvey might be the starter. Johnny Richardson, a guy with a lot of speed at that running back spot. And you look at the receivers, they're pretty solid there as well. Javon Baker, and they've done a good job in the transfer portal. Kobe Hudson, who was there last year, but a guy that transferred in. They've got some decent receivers here as well. Offensive line looks to be very strong. This is going to be a good offensive line. Defensive side of the ball, they've actually got some talent there. So yeah, this could be a pretty sneaky team in the Big 12. I don't think they really have any major weaknesses. They've got talent. I think their talent is comparable with the other teams in the Big 12, and they've got a lot of experience. Like I said, UCF and Kansas probably the most experienced teams this year. And so if a team was going to maybe surprise and make a run at the Big 12 championship, maybe it's UCF or maybe it's Kansas. Let's go to number 5, Texas Tech, another team with a lot of production coming back this year. Really high on this team. I think they're going to be good. We'll see if Tyler Shutt can stay healthy at the quarterback spot for them. They got Taj Brooks back at running back. You look at the receivers. They got a lot of talented guys at receiver. They got some big guys. J.J. Sparkman, a 6'4 receiver. We'll see if he can step up this year. So this is going to be a good team. Jerron Bradley, that's the guy I was thinking of, 6'5". He's a really good player there at receiver for them as well. Baylor Cupp is a transfer, a guy that transferred in from Texas A&M. He was a big-time recruit, pretty solid for them last year. We'll see if he can take that next step. And then on the offensive line, they look really, really good. I think this will be one of the better offensive lines in the Big 12. Then we go to the defensive side of the ball, and they look to be pretty strong. A lot of experience coming back there. Linebacker position may be a bit of a concern. I think that's probably the one area where I am concerned about Texas Tech. Secondary looks really good. They may have one of the better secondaries in the Big 12. So all in all, this is an experienced team, a talented team, and a team that I think is a real contender in the Big 12. Number 4, TCU. I don't think they're going to be quite as good as last year. We'll see. Chandler Morris should be the guy taking over at quarterback, but they're going to miss some really, really talented players. They added Trey Sanders in the transfer portal at running back. He's going to be good for them. John Paul Richardson, another transfer at wide receiver. They do have Jared Wiley coming back at tight end. But again, they're just going to miss some of those big-time playmakers from last year. Offensive line looks to be pretty strong for them. I don't think that's going to be a major concern. And then if you look at them defensively, they're going to be pretty strong there as well. And I think at all 3 levels, this is going to be a good TCU team. Like I said, not as good as last year, but still, this will be a good team. I think they're a top 25 team. Number 3, Kansas State. This is a team that a lot of people are high on coming into this year. And we'll see. Will Howard will be back at quarterback. Of course, he took over last year. And you look at the running back position for them, they added Trayshawn Ward, transfer from Florida State. DJ Giddens, he played pretty well behind Deuce Vaughn last year. Wide receivers look to be okay for them. They need some guys to step up there. Going to have a really good offensive line. That should be a strength for this team. They should be able to run the football. And then you look at the defensive side for them. They look to be pretty strong there. I wouldn't say they're going to be the best defense in the Big 12, but no areas where I'm really concerned. So I think Kansas State, with the experience coming back and the coaching staff that they have, this is going to be a really dangerous team and a team that has a chance to repeat as Big 12 champions. Number 2 is Oklahoma. And I know they didn't have a great year last year, but I just feel like if you look at the roster, you look at the talent, they are one of the top 2 teams talent-wise, roster-wise in the Big 12, which is really, that's the difference in doing these rankings versus predictions. You could say, yeah, this roster is that talented, but I don't think it's going to work out. I don't, they're going to choke it in this game or in that game, and they're going to lose a few games. You never know how the season's going to go, but just evaluating these rosters, this team's going to be good. And they have Dylan Gabriel back at quarterback. They're loaded at running back and wide receiver. No concerns there at all. Offensive line looks really good for them. Defensively, they struggled last year. I think they will be better, though. They added some transfers on the defensive line. I think Brent Venables starting to get his guys in there. And again, talent-wise, this is one of the top 2 teams in the Big 12. Oklahoma going to be, I think, really good this year. And then number 1 is Texas. Again, if we're talking about talent, this is the most talented team in the Big 12. Quinn Ewers at quarterback. We saw what he could do when he was healthy last year. They're going to miss Bijan Robinson, but I'm not really concerned about them. Jonathan Brooks has a chance to be really good. Keelan Robinson also will be back. Receivers, really good. Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, transfer coming in. Isaiah Nair. I mean, this is a really good group of receivers. Tight ends as well. Jatavian Sanders, one of the top tight ends in the country, coming back. And then offensive line. They're going to be really good on the offensive line. And that's something we kind of saw last year with some of these young guys stepping up. And defensively, I think they take a little bit of a step back from where they were last year. This was a really good defense, but they've still got a lot of talent. I think they're led by Jalen Ford at that linebacker position. He has a chance to be an All-American this year. And, really, if you go across the board, they added Jalen Catalon at safety from Arkansas, another All-American type player. You just go throughout the entire defense. They've got talent. They've got guys. And if they can put it all together, this team has a chance to have a good defense. We know the offense is going to be good. And I think Texas, definitely the number 1 team, at least right now, for our post-spring power rankings in the Big 12.